"Say hello to the river, Helen," Sabrina whispered, her breath icy against my ear. Before I could even turn, her hands pressed firmly against my back. I stumbled, my hips screaming in protest, and the next thing I knew, the world tilted. Cold water surged up to meet me, swallowing my body whole. My son, Michael, stood on the deck just feet away. His face was blank, no shock, no horror, just the faint curve of a smile that told me everything. This was no accident. The current dragged at me, pulling me away from the shining white boat that just hours earlier had felt like a promise of reconciliation. As I fought to keep my head above the surface, a single thought cut through the terror like a knife. My own child wants me dead, but let me back up. Let me tell you how a perfectly ordinary Tuesday morning turned into betrayal so sharp it nearly carved me out of existence. I'm Helen Marshall, 66 years old, a widow, a mother of one. My husband Thomas died 2 years ago, leaving behind a sprawling logistics company that he and I had built from nothing. When he passed, the empire became mine, not his siblings, not the board of directors, me, the sole owner of a fortune worth nearly $2.7 billion. And since then, my life had been a balancing act between grief, recovery, and the desperate hope that my son still wanted me as his mother, not just his bank. So when Michael called that morning, personally, not through his secretary, my heart lifted. He hadn't called me directly in months. His voice was warm, almost boyish, as he said, "Mom, let's celebrate your recovery from surgery. Just you, me, and Sabrina, a family outing. We've got the boat waiting." I should have heard the danger in those words. I should have felt the insincerity crawling under his tone. But loneliness makes fools of us all. And after weeks of physical therapy for my hip replacement, I wanted nothing more than to believe my son cared. I wore the navy dress Thomas used to love, the one he said made my eyes brighter, and called a cab to the dockyard in Trenton. The boat gleamed in the early sunlight, 40 feet of polished white, a luxury that screamed of money spent far too freely. Michael greeted me with a hug that was all for show, and Sabrina watched from the deck with a smile as sharp as broken glass. The river sparkled around us, calm and inviting, but I had no idea that beneath the surface, danger circled, waiting for the moment I let my guard down. And when it came, it was my own family who pushed me in. The river was merciless. The shock of the cold stole the air from my lungs, and the weight of my soaked dress dragged me downward. For a heartbeat, panic clawed at me. My hip throbbed, my chest burned, and a cruel thought flashed across my mind. This is how it ends. After everything, drowned like nothing more than a mistake on the water. But I've never been the type to go quietly. I kicked off my heels, clawed my way to the surface, and gasped for air just in time to see the boat pulling away. Sabrina was already on the phone. Her voice carried faintly across the water. Michael didn't even look back, not once. The betrayal hurt worse than the cold. I tried to scream, but my voice cracked, swallowed by the vastness of the Delaware River. The current carried me farther, my arms straining against the drag of fabric and the weight of betrayal pressing against my ribs. For a moment, I almost gave up. Then, salvation. A fishing trawler crested around the bend, its rusty frame cutting across the sunlight. A man in his 60s, stocky and weathered by years on the water, leaned over the railing. His eyes narrowed, then widened in shock. "Hold on, lady," he shouted. "Tyler, get the rope." 2 strong arms pulled me aboard moments later, his and those of a lanky teenager with the same sharp jawline. I collapsed onto the deck, coughing up river water, shivering so violently my teeth rattled. "Holy hell," the man muttered, wrapping me in a wool blanket that smelled of salt and smoke. "You trying to get yourself killed?" I shook my head, still gasping. "No. My family. They tried to kill me." He studied me in silence, his gray eyes sharp, not judgmental, calculating. The boy, Tyler, looked horrified but curious. "I'm Frank Doyle," the man finally said, his voice gravelly. "This is my grandson. We're out early to catch stripers, but looks like we caught something else instead." I gripped his arm desperately. Please, you can't tell us anyone you found me. Not yet. Frank's brow furrowed. That's a hell of a thing to ask, lady. You in some kind of trouble? Not trouble, I said, my voice trembling. A war. And if they know I survived, they'll finish the job. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then slowly, he nodded. Sometimes the right thing ain't what the law says. Fine, you stay quiet. We'll say it was driftwood we saw, but you'd better tell me the whole story. I pulled the blanket tighter, my body still trembling but my mind sharpening with a clarity I hadn't felt in months. They think I'm dead, I whispered, and I'm going to let them think so. Until I destroy them. 4 days later, I stood hidden beneath the shadow of an old oak tree, on the edge of Greenwood Cemetery, a borrowed black veil covering my face. From where I stood, I had the perfect view of my own funeral. The casket was silver, polished, absurdly expensive, empty, of course, a showpiece for the living, not a resting place for the dead. Rows of chairs were filled with mourners, some genuine, some there for the spectacle of it all. And at the center of it stood Michael and Sabrina, dressed in flawless black. They looked the part of grieving children so perfectly, it could have been theater. Michael's eyes glistened as he accepted condolences, while Sabrina dabbed her cheeks with a silk handkerchief. To anyone watching, they were the picture of loss. To me, they were liars standing on a stage they'd built out of my supposed death. I bit the inside of my cheek until I tasted iron. Reporters hovered at the edges, cameras clicking. I'd already seen the articles. According to the Trenton Times, I'd fallen victim to the cruel unpredictability of age. They quoted Michael, claiming I had shown worrisome signs of confusion. In the months before the accident, Sabrina had gone even further, sobbing to the press about her fear that Helen would wander off one day and never return. The narrative was set. I wasn't a victim of betrayal. I was a confused old woman whose decline had tragically ended in drowning. I scanned the crowd, looking for familiar faces. My neighbor, Mrs. Dalton, was there, tears streaming openly. Old friends from my church group. Even the doctor who had performed my surgery, his head bowed respectfully. These people truly mourned me. That was the part that burned the deepest, genuine grief being twisted into fuel for Sabrina and Michael's lies. But then I noticed something strange. My longtime lawyer wasn't there, neither was my accountant, and my financial advisor, the one who'd guided Thomas and me through decades of decisions, was conspicuously absent. Why would the people who managed my billions not attend the funeral of the woman they supposedly served, unless, of course, they had other roles to play? As the pastor droned on, Sabrina leaned into Michael's shoulder, her face angled just enough for the cameras. She looked beautiful, tragic, almost saintly. And I realized she was playing not just for sympathy, but for legitimacy. Every tear was an investment in her new life as the grieving heiress. I gripped the bark of the oak tree, my nails digging in. Let them bury an empty box. Let them sell my image as senile and lost. Because while they mourned a ghost, I was watching, waiting, and very much alive. That night, while the echoes of my own funeral still rattled in my chest, I made a decision. If I wanted the truth, I had to return to the house that had once been mine. Frank drove me to Princeton, where the Marshall home stood like a monument to everything Thomas and I had built. 35 years of laughter, arguments, Christmas mornings, and late-night talks had lived inside those walls. Now it belonged to Michael and Sabrina, signed over after Thomas's death because I'd believed family meant something. The street was quiet when we arrived near midnight. Porch lights flickered here and there, but no movement. My hand trembled as I slid the old brass key into the back door lock. Michael had never asked for it back. Why would he? As far as he knew, I was lying at the bottom of the Delaware. The click of the tumblers sent a shiver down my spine. The house smelled different as soon as I stepped inside. Expensive colognes, harsh cleaning products, something artificial that masked what it really was. No longer my home. I moved slowly through the rooms, careful with the flashlight Frank had given me. The furniture was draped in white sheets, but beneath them I glimpsed new leather couches, an entertainment system far larger than anything I'd ever allowed Thomas to buy. On the counters sat bowls of imported fruit and wine bottles with labels I didn't recognize. It wasn't a house someone visited, it was a house someone lived in. In the kitchen, the refrigerator hummed. Inside were fresh groceries, the kind delivered weekly, organic vegetables, French cheese, baby formula. My pulse quickened. It was the office upstairs, Thomas's old study, that held the truth. The desk was no longer his orderly workspace. Papers spilled across the surface, binders stacked in neat piles. At the top, stamped in bold black letters, was a folder labeled Project Helen. My stomach turned cold. Inside were medical reports, pages and pages describing cognitive decline, supposed lapses in memory, hallucinations I'd never had. Each document bore my name, some with forged signatures, others authenticated by doctors I didn't know. There were notes about staged incidents, forgetting an appointment, mixing up medications, wandering at a dinner party. I remembered those moments, Sabrina whispering the wrong date, Michael switching pill bottles. Every mistake had been engineered. They weren't just trying to steal my fortune, they were rewriting me. I snapped photos with a disposable camera Frank had given me, my hands shaking. That's when it happened. A sound, soft, fragile, unmistakable. A baby crying. I froze, every nerve in my body alight. The sound drifted from the second floor, thin but real, winding through the hallways like a ghost. Michael and Sabrina had no children. They'd always insisted they were too busy, too ambitious. So whose baby was in my house? And why were they hiding it? I stood frozen in the hallway, my heart hammering. The cry rose again, plaintive, insistent, echoing through the empty rooms. For a moment, I wondered if grief and exhaustion had conjured it. But no, the sound was real. I crept up the staircase, each step groaning like a warning. The baby's cries led me to the guest bedroom, the one Sabrina had always hated because it smelled old. The door was ajar. I nudged it open, and my breath caught. Inside was a nursery. The wallpaper had been stripped and replaced with pastel clouds. A white crib stood against the far wall, draped with a canopy. Shelves lined with stuffed animals and brand new toys gleamed in the dim light. And there, swaddled in an expensive blanket, lay the source of the cries, a baby no older than a few weeks, his face red with need. My knees nearly buckled. Michael and Sabrina had never told me they were expecting. I'd seen Sabrina only days before on the yacht, slim, radiant, not a woman recovering from childbirth. So whose child was this? I took a cautious step closer, then stopped when headlights swept across the window. A car door slammed outside. Bang! My blood turned to ice. Michael and Sabrina were home. I darted back down the stairs, clutching the disposable camera to my chest. By the time their voices floated through the front door, I had slipped out the back into the garden. I didn't stop running until I reached the corner where Frank's pickup waited. I tumbled inside, breathless, my pulse wild. "There's a baby," I gasped. "In the house, a newborn." Frank's brows shot up. "What?" "They're hiding a child. I don't know whose, but it isn't theirs." The engine rumbled as he pulled us away from the curb, his face grim. "That's not just greed anymore, Helen. That's something darker." He was right, and I needed answers. The next morning, Frank introduced me to someone he trusted, a private investigator named Laura Kane. A sharp-eyed woman in her 40s with a detective's patience, she listened as I told her everything. When I mentioned the baby, her expression hardened. "I know a place that matches this pattern," she said. "A private clinic across the state line. Discreet. Expensive. They specialize in surrogacy arrangements." Within days, Laura confirmed what I feared. The baby in my old house had been born only 3 weeks earlier. The surrogate mother, a 17-year-old runaway named Anna Rivera from Pennsylvania, had died suddenly during delivery. No family, no inquiries. "Healthy girl, no complications," Laura said, sliding the file toward me. "But the records say cardiac arrest. Too convenient." I stared at the photo of Anna, a child herself, smiling shyly at the camera. Michael and Sabrina hadn't just stolen my fortune, they had stolen a life. The file Laura handed me felt heavier than stone. Ana Rivera's smiling face stared back at me, frozen in time, a teenager whose life had been bartered away. My hands shook as I traced the edges of the photograph. "Someone arranged this," I whispered. "Michael and Sabrina don't have the brains for something this elaborate." Laura nodded. "Exactly. Surrogacy clinics don't just let minors walk in. There's a handler, a fixer, someone with power who makes it all legal on paper." The next week, she dug deeper, combing through property records, legal filings, and names tied to the so-called clinic. One name appeared again and again, like a shadow lurking at the edge of every document. Claudia Mercer, an estate attorney in Newark, polished, respected, and terrifyingly efficient. Mercer specialized in family transitions. On the surface, she helped wealthy families navigate inheritance planning. Beneath that mask, Laura discovered a darker pattern. Dozens of elderly clients who had died under mysterious but conveniently timed circumstances. "She's running a network," Laura said, spreading surveillance photos across Frank's kitchen Toulouse. "Your son and daughter-in-law are just pawns." Mercer recruits greedy relatives, manufactures evidence of mental decline, and clears the path for inheritance. I've tracked at least 20 suspicious deaths tied to her clients in the past 5 years. The pictures chilled me. Claudia stepping out of luxury cars, shaking hands with men in suits, slipping into hospitals and private clinics, all wikis there, but never directly tied to the deaths. "So she's the mastermind," I said, my voice low. And Michael delivered me into her hands. Laura tapped one photo, a grainy shot of Claudia leaving the same clinic where Anna had died. Mercer was there that night. Witnesses say she oversaw the birth personally. The baby was delivered. Anna never left alive. I pressed a hand to my mouth. The betrayal of my son already cut deep. But this was monstrous. "They think you're dead," Laura continued. "Mercer is moving fast. She's pushing probate through the courts. Within weeks, your estate will belong to Michael, Sabrina, and that baby." My throat tightened. "She'll kill again if she has to, won't she?" Laura's eyes didn't flinch. "She already has. And if she learns you survived, she won't stop until you're gone for good." The weight of it settled over me like a shroud. My son was no longer just greedy. He was entangled in a machine that devoured the vulnerable, laundering murder into inheritance. For the first time since being shoved into the river, I felt real fear, not just for myself, for that baby upstairs in my old house, alive but living on borrowed time. The decision came to me one sleepless night at Mrs. Chen's kitchen table. I couldn't keep running. If Claudia Mercer was the spider at the center of this web, I needed to step into the web myself and force her into the open. Laura didn't like it. Frank downright hated it. But there was no other way. Mercer was too careful, too insulated. She needed to believe I was vulnerable, broken, desperate. Then she'd talk. And when she talked, I would have the evidence to destroy her. The plan was simple, terrifying, and utterly insane. I would confront Michael and Sabrina in my old house, knowing Mercer would come to finish the job. Hidden recorders, placed earlier by Laura, would capture every word. Frank would be stationed nearby with federal agents Laura had quietly alerted. When the evening came, I slipped through the front door of the Princeton house just before dusk. My heart pounded as I sat in Thomas's old armchair, the very spot where he'd once read the newspaper every morning. I wanted them to see me there first thing when they walked in. The door opened at exactly 7. Michael froze in the doorway, the keys falling from his hand. His face went white. "Hello, darling," I said evenly, my voice steady despite the tremor in my bones. "Did you miss me?" Sabrina's scream pierced the air, raw and shrill. For a moment, I thought she might faint. Michael just stood there trembling, as though he was staring at a ghost that refused to stay buried. Before they could speak, another presence filled the room. Claudia Mercer entered, as if she owned the place, her tailored suit flawless, her eyes cold and assessing. "Well," she said, her tone sharp as glass, "the woman who refuses to die." She set a leather portfolio on the coffee table, glancing at me as though I were a mere inconvenience. "This is unwise, Mrs. Marshall, very unwise." I folded my hands in my lap. "Is it? Or is it unwise for you to sit here and admit what you've been doing?" She gave a thin smile. "You think you've cornered me, but I provide a service. Families like yours steers want freedom from burdens. I make it clean, efficient, legal. Call it estate acceleration if you like. The old past beasts out peacefully. The young inherit sooner. Everyone wins." Her words were venom disguised as reason. Michael swallowed hard. Sabrina gripped his arm, and I leaned forward, my voice low and calm. "You've murdered people, dozens, and tonight the world is going to hear you say it." The hidden microphones blinked red in the dark, and then, right on cue, the windows shattered as agents poured through every entrance. Chaos erupted as agents swarmed the house. The crack of boots against hardwood, the shouts of commands, the metallic snap of handcuffs. It all blurred together in a storm of justice I'd been waiting for since the day Sabrina pushed me into the river. Claudia Mercer tried to run. She bolted for the kitchen, her expensive heels skidding across the floor. She made it less than 6 feet before 3 agents slammed her down, her leather portfolio scattering like broken wings. Michael and Sabrina stood paralyzed on the sofa, their masks of composure stripped away, nothing left but pale faces and trembling hands. "Claudia Mercer," one agent barked, "you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, racketeering, wire fraud, and elder abuse." Her lips curled, but she said nothing. Then the agents turned to Michael and Sabrina. The silence was louder than any scream, as they read my own son his rights. His eyes flicked toward me, desperate, pleading. "Mom," he whispered, his voice cracking. "I didn't mean for it to go this far, but it had." The legal storm that followed lasted months. Claudia Mercer was convicted on all counts, sentenced to life without parole. Her network unraveled like rotten rope. Doctors, lawyers, even a probate judge fell with her. Michael and Sabrina took plea deals, 25 years and 20 years, stripped of the wealth they had tried to steal. But the most important chapter wasn't written in a courtroom. It was written in family court, in a quiet chamber where I petitioned for custody of the baby, Ana Rivera's child. I stood before the judge, holding him in my arms. His dark eyes, so serious for someone so small, studied me with a kind of silent trust. "His name will be Samuel Rivera Marshall," I told the court. "Rivera for his mother, who gave him life. Marshall for the family who will love him, not use him." The gavel struck. Custody granted. Now, 5 years later, Samuel is a boy full of laughter and questions. He knows the truth. He knows his birth mother was a brave young girl who wanted him to live. He knows the people who tried to raise him were not family, only thieves blinded by greed. And he knows that love, real love, is a choice, not a bloodline. Sometimes when I tuck him in at night, I remember the river, the cold hands of betrayal dragging me under. But then I look at him, safe and smiling. And I know why I survived. Family is not the people who share your name. Family is the people who choose you, protect you, and stand beside you when the current rises. That's the only inheritance that matters.